David, in really trying to discern not just the existence of God, but do any of the religions that we commonly know today give any real closeness or any real connection with the God who supposedly created everything? One of the critical questions is, these religions are all so different, there's some things in common. How can more than one be true, or the diversity among them, how can any of them be true? And what I have found in talking to philosophers is that there's a radical difference. Some would believe that all religions show aspects of the truth, and some are extremely exclusivistic if you really push them. And they say, basically, my way is the right way, and everybody else where they differ from me is wrong. What does Judaism say? Okay, well, if you don't mind, I'm going to break up the question about exclusivism. And I should say that the term itself, although it's caught on so much in the literature, I can't turn the clock back, but it's a term that I'm not particularly enamored of because it connotes this sort of smugness or haughtiness about one's own. But still, I'll follow the terminology. I think there are really two issues about exclusivism. One is there truth in other religions? The other is, what happens in terms of salvation for those who adhere to another religion? Now, the first question, the question of whether Judaism is exclusivist in terms of the truth, I think clearly Judaism recognizes certain truths, maybe even many truths in other religions, because Judaism has those same truths. Belief in monotheism, belief in creation, belief in certain ethical principles, I think which sort of can tie religions together. But on the critical issues that divide them, for example, has the Messiah come already? Are the laws of the Hebrew Bible abrogated? I think on those fundamental questions, the Jews do believe that they do have the truth, and something that contradicts it simply can't be true. You can't maintain contradictory propositions. And this is a view that quite a number of philosophers have taken about their own religions. And what you're saying, though, is that those aspects in which you're saying other religions are true you're only saying that because they are similar to what you believe your true religion states. In those, that the ones that, in other words, what I'm saying is that you're not conceding anything by doing that. I don't think so. No, it's simply the commonality. But I'd say there's certain critical issues. Now, that isn't to say that a Jew cannot learn from what Christians have to say. A number of very good Jewish thinkers, including Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik, who was, besides being an outstanding Talmudist in the 20th century, was one of outstanding thinkers. His footnotes include a lot of references to Barth and Kierkegaard and so forth. And in his own theology, he uses concepts like dialectic and the importance of suffering, which he got from a kind of intellectual dialogue with Christian theology. But in order to do that, he first has to make sure that really touches base with Judaism. In other words, studying another religion can lead you to appreciate certain ideas that are in your own religion that you might not have otherwise magnified. And I think, we see some of that, and I think that approach is a very nice approach, and it fits in well with the mission of Yeshiva University, which is combined Torah with general culture. But of course, again, within limits, that is to say, there are certain core propositions in Judaism that contradict certain core propositions in other religions, and Judaism does maintain that it is true. So that's one question on the question of sort of the cognitive claims. The other question is about salvation. Now here, Judaism believes, I'll give you a statement from the Talmud, which says that the righteous of the nations have a share in the world to come. Pretty overt affirmation that you can make it to the world to come without necessarily being Jewish. In fact, in some ways it's easier because there are far, far fewer laws for you to violate. And that's a very important consideration. Now, the question is sort of how far this is taken. Maimonides had a passage that sort of got some people up in arms, where he said that this only applies if the non-Jew is observing what's called the Noahide laws, that is basic
basic laws that are needed for civilized society, because Moses told them to do that. Because Moses commanded the non-Jews to behave that way. So in other words, the person has to sort of have a belief in Moses as legislator. But Moses Mendelssohn was very upset with this, and he brought up the example of Confucius and the example of Solon. Still, Maimonides aside, by and large, there are quite a few significant Jewish thinkers who believe that one can have a share in the world to come as one practices, assuming that one practices ethics. Now, needless to say, there are dissenters from this view, but I think that one can assemble enough sources to show this sort of idea.
So this would be the central idea of Judaism. There may be dissenters, but the core idea is that you don't have to be a believer in Judaism or part of the Jewish faith in order to have a share in the world to come.
Now, there are questions that come up about how far this goes. For example, would a pure idol worshiper qualify? And again, there are lots of views about this, but essentially there is this more liberal, this kind of liberal position that
but there's a liberal position even within Orthodox Judaism.
Right, even within.
And so basically, the view is that yes, we are the one true religion, but our one true religion can encompass everyone.
Well, it's not so much. Yeah, it's not even so much a question of encompassing. It's just that the ultimate aim of things, the world to come, is something that one doesn't have to be Jewish in order to achieve. And this sort of view also affects Jewish views towards conversion. Jews don't necessarily encourage converts. Potential converts have other means of salvation. Though, of course, we have had many great converts in our time. So in that sense, there's this sort of receptivity in many circles, not in all. One more dimension of this question of which we could call particularism versus universalism has to do with what's the vision of the end of days. Mm-hmm. And is it that others will convert to Judaism, or they will embrace monotheism? And I think the widespread Jewish view is that they will convert to monotheism, embrace monotheism, and not necessarily embrace Judaism.
So the passages in the Hebrew Bible would show at this time, at the end of days, when all nations will come to Jerusalem to learn, they're not learning Judaism, they're learning monotheism.
A key passage is that God will rule over all peoples, but it doesn't necessarily imply that they're going to embrace Judaism, and many, many interpreters believe that it's simply an embrace of monotheism.
So what does that mean in terms of Judaism's attitude towards those who would claim a pluralistic view of the world, that basically all religions are real, they just have different angles that they're looking at the same thing?
This is actually becoming a kind of popular view in contemporary theology, and there are some Jewish theologians who have argued in this direction, and it ultimately derives, I think, or at least it's parallel to the views of John Hick, John Hick, the British philosopher of religion, that all religions are sort of manifestations of the same ineffable, unknowable God, and these are simply cultural, conditioned expressions of this basic belief. I have a couple of problems with this idea. One problem I have with it is that I think it really winds up belittling the importance of having a belief in the first place. I'm reminded of a story of a congregant who comes to his rabbi and asks him, who was greater, Abraham or Moses? And the rabbi says, Abraham. And the congregant says, but Moses took us out of Egypt. The rabbi says, okay, so Moses. It doesn't really matter so much what you believe. It belittles the importance of having this particular belief, because on Hick's view, it doesn't make any difference, what I believe. I'll just jump to another religion. Secondly, I think that what Hick is advocating could be taken as simply another religion. That is to say, this is a religion that is syncretic, pluralistic, and so forth. And one can also construe that as an exclusivist statement, that this is the proper way of religion. So it simply takes its place among other religions. We have one thinker, very fascinating thinker in Judaism, who I think affords us an interesting comparison to Hick. Rabbi Abraham Isaac Kook was one of the great mystical thinkers and great legal authorities that Jews have had in the 20th century. He was the first Ashkenazi chief rabbi of mandatory Palestine. And he had a lot of ideas that were very fascinating, and one of them being, as a mystic, he thought that everything in the world has value, even idolatry. Why? From idolatry, you can learn the importance of passion for your deity. You can learn the idea of novelty. I mean, he thought that these things are valuable. So everything's got some sort of value to it. But your task is to extract the values in what's around you and to discard the things that are not valuable. And so people sometimes look at him as something close to Hick. But I don't think it's true, because Rabbi Kook is very emphatic as to the reasons why he believes that Judaism is kind of the best religion. And one of the reasons is it's the best religion because it absorbs the best in everything else in the world, but it rejects that which is not truly valuable.